First then, let's talk about Israel and Iran. American intelligence agencies are warning of an imminent attack on Israel by Iran or one of its proxy groups. An attack could lead to a major escalation in the region, already looking to be at a very, very dangerous point. And it would cause, well, diplomatic, economic, military headaches around the world. Speaking at the White House, the US President Joe Biden warned Iran not to carry out its threat.
As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
That's Joe Biden's message. Now let's talk first to Zach Anders, a reporter in Gaza. He broke the news of the strike in Damascus that led us to this possible escalation. Welcome to you, Zach.
Hello again, John.
Hi, you're talking to us now live from the border city of Gaza City. Can you tell me, though, from there, how is Israel dealing with this possibility of an attack from Iran, possibly direct, possibly involving its many proxies?
Yeah, Israeli sources believe that this isn't going to look like some sort of grand attack that's going to target civilian centers. But that doesn't discount the concerns of their military installations that are in the heart of some very populated areas. Today, just a few hours ago, actually, the Iranian regime tweeting on Twitter or X the images and actual geolocation of the port of Haifa. This is an Israeli naval base. It's very close to the Lebanon border. And it was one of those targets that Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah has, in just about every speech he's given since this conflict began, called Haifa one of the points of Israeli weakness, that Hezbollah has the capability to strike these places like Haifa, like some of the other military installations in Israel's north, the Northern Command Base, some of the air bases, Ramat David. So there are certainly areas, of course, Israel's a very small country, so wherever you go, there's going to be civilian areas around these military bases. But it's the belief tonight that as this concern is at its highest, and even the U.S. Central Command General has flown into Israel and is supposedly going to be helping coordinate some of the defense efforts that are taking place here across multiple arenas. You've got an array of air defense networks that the Israelis are employing, presumably with the U.S., land-based, sea-based, and some of the Air Force jets that have the ability to shoot down some of these slower loitering drones, or these Shahed drones that Iran is so successful at making. So that's the concern tonight, is
Yes.
that military installations will be the target, potentially in the south of Israel as well, in Eilat. But no one can really say for certain how is Iran's appetite, how big their appetite is to provoke Israel into what would be presumably in a fairly intense response on Iranian soil.
Well, indeed. And from the Israeli point of view, Israel is very well defended against air attack and missile attack, especially with America saying they will be there doing all that's necessary. But Hezbollah in the north, they have an enormous arsenal of rockets and missiles. And Israel, of course, we know how well armed Iran is. So, I mean, how confident can Israelis be at this really difficult, delicate moment, Zach?
You know, there's confidence that emanates from all of the military sources, but the everyday Israelis have been watching every single headline intensely over the last 6 months and recognize that Hezbollah has been able to hit military points in the north, and even the Houthis have been able to hit ships in the Red Sea as well. And so it's not a given that if you are to be attacked that you'd be able to shoot down everything, even though Israel has one of the world's most advanced air defense arrays. I think one of the things that stands out, as in my conversations with some inside the the IDF, is that the concern for a saturation attack, which is when you try to just overwhelm the air defenses, is the most vulnerable that Israel would be at that point. If Hezbollah was to launch, it's believed through U.S. estimates that they have tens of thousands of rockets and missiles and then thousands of drones. If they were to launch a fair majority, or as much as they could muster at once, and time it with, say, attacks in the south as well, that would put a serious strain on the air defenses, and you would presumably have the majority of aerial targets shot down, but not all of them.
Right, so while Israel and its American allies and others watch carefully for any kind of threat from Iran or from Hezbollah on the Red Sea and so on. The Gaza conflict is still so delicately poised, and America will be hoping for some sort of breakthrough on the negotiations that have been stop, start, faltering, and then beginning again. What's the latest on that, Zach?
Well, the latest is tonight we're seeing a lot of movement on this hostage deal. And the greatest headline coming out of Wall Street Journal report from U.S. sources that the potential for getting a deal done hinges on the proof of life of elderly women and children hostages, that they're trying to get to that number of 40 hostages, and that Hamas has not been able to produce a list of those that are alive that could even be provided for an exchange. And the Wall Street Journal report has sources inside the Biden administration that believes that the majority of hostages are dead and have been either killed, were killed on October 7th, or have since been killed inside Gaza. They don't put a specific number on how many they think are still alive, but that speaks to the strain of these hostage negotiations, as Israel has made several concessions over the last week and a half, including adding additional Palestinian prisoners, allowing people to move, civilians to move back into the city that's behind me right now, Gaza City, and in the north of the Gaza Strip. And apparently this was the last element of that hostage deal, was Hamas had been holding out in providing proof of life or a list of those who are alive. And now that we're at this stage, we're seeing reports that Hamas is unable to do so.
And if, I guess we can only calculate and speculate about this finally, Zach, if those reports are right and the hostages are for the most part dead, that would surely have the effect of just making the Israeli attitude to this, let alone that of Benjamin Netanyahu, more militant.
The only thing that stands out at this juncture is that if you get to a point where the hostages are the majority are presumed dead, and you have potentially just, the men that have been held out, I would expect to see, and we've heard the Israeli commentators, the statements from the defense minister as well, that they feel like they have, in some aspects, held back in their military campaign. I would be concerned to see what the conflict, what the warfare looks like inside the Gaza Strip, should they not have any hope that hostages are still alive, that this isn't their, quote, rescue mission.
That's a dark thought. Zach, always good to get your perspective there live from Gaza City. Now, let me just get the assessment, the expertise on board of Catherine Philp, the World Affairs editor at The Times. Hello to you, Catherine.
Hi, John.
Hi. I mean, looking at it now from the America's perspective for a moment, Joe Biden gave this ironclad promise of support for Israel at this time of threat from Iran. One imagines the White House must be imagining and hoping that could deter an Iranian attack before it happens, because a direct conflict between Iran and Israel, with America involved too, that would be a war Iran cannot win.
Well, I think it's interesting that Zach, in his assessment there, talked more about what Hezbollah might do towards Israel rather than Iran itself. There's never been a direct confrontation between Iran and Israel of this kind. It's always been through Iranian proxies like Hezbollah or Hamas. So I think that the stakes of it being a direct conflict are so overwhelmingly high that almost mitigates against it. I mean, the US rush to be by Israel's side, I think, also is linked to that, and the hope of a deterrent or a sort of calming down of things. But I think we also need to see this in the context of how US-Israeli relations have been over the past week, since, or slightly more actually, since the killing of those 7 aid workers in Gaza, and a pretty frosty conversation, as we know, between Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu, in which he ordered him more or less to open the gates of Gaza and let the aid in, which still has not happened. So you want to essentially, when looking at a threat from Iran, you want to rebalance that and not leave Tehran thinking that that there's a split to be exploited, that a lasting split to be exploited.
Yes, and when we discuss the various Iranian proxies, we're still looking at a formidable array of force, aren't we? In the north, to the north of Israel, the Hezbollah with an enormous arsenal of rockets. We've seen the Houthis launching their strikes in the Red Sea. We've seen other attacks launched out of Iraq from Islamist proxies. They have an enormous amount of firepower.
They do. I mean, let's not forget that 4 years ago, when the Americans took out General Soleimani, the Iranian general in Erbil, that Iran did retaliate with the largest ever ballistic missile strike on U.S. Military bases in Iraq. It actually didn't kill any American soldiers, which is intriguing. You could think it might have been balanced in that way, so as to show off firepower, but not so much that it would provoke a retaliation on Iranian soil. I think the key proxy here to look at is Hezbollah. I mean, obviously the Houthis are remarkably able to strangle shipping in the Red Sea. They've been able to launch sort of mass drone attacks on Saudi Arabia in the past. But the people with the real firepower in this arena are in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah. Now, many in Israel's military are very concerned about Israel's ability to take on Hezbollah at the same time as the conflict in Gaza. However, it's been quite some time since Hamas have been in a position to fire rockets out of Gaza into Israel. So this was probably even factored in by the Israeli military planners that when they launched that attack in Syria, that they may be more capable now of taking on a full-throated Hezbollah response than they would have had they tried it 6 months ago.
Can I just get your thoughts then on the potential implications of this conflict escalating in this way, in political terms, destabilization of countries like Egypt and Jordan, and economic terms, the effects on markets and on the Gulf states, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great outlook. No, no, it's hard to see how anyone can benefit from this. I mean, I think that perhaps one of the two places where we're seeing the least reason, well, I think we can write off Hamas in Gaza for reason, since they launched that attack on October 7th. But we're not seeing much reason out of Tehran, and we're particularly not seeing a great deal of reason out of the offices of the Israeli Prime Minister. He's gone against several of his own members of his war cabinet. Meanwhile, he's under pressure from his own right wing, who've threatened to collapse his government if he doesn't continue the conflict and attack Rafah in Gaza. So there's a lot of things to be balanced here. I mean, the other thing that we've got sort of essentially on hold is this rapprochement that was ongoing between much of the Arab world and Israel that the Hamas attacks interfered with. And Saudi has actually emerged as quite a vocal leader of attempts to calm things down in the region and stop them from spiraling out of control, because it's very hard to see who at all could benefit from that happening.
And Catherine, just a final word from you on hopes, not just America's hopes, an awful lot of people's hopes on some sort of, I don't know, arrangement being reached through a hostage deal. Maybe, as America discusses, maybe leading to something more of a lasting peace. If, as Zach was telling us, there are these reports saying that maybe most of those hostages are dead now. If that turns out to be the case, then is it your assumption that all bets would be off?
It's hard to say. I mean, one of the strongest political constituencies in Israel right now is the families of the hostages, who've been putting an enormous amount of pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. If it turns out that that their loved ones are dead, and are dead because they weren't rescued earlier, then I would say that that makes things very difficult for him. What we know is that Hamas have said they aren't able to confirm whether those people are alive in those numbers and who they are. This is also partly the fact that Hamas has never been clear where all these people were, as far as we can tell. We know of those reports that civilians in Gaza and also other militant groups came through the fence that day on October 7th and took hostages. And effectively what's going on in Gaza right now, the fact that the place is more or less flattened, is probably making it even harder for Hamas to ascertain where these hostages are or if they're alive. And again, a lot of these hostages, we don't know if they are dead. We don't know how they died yet. And as I say, the families are very anxious to know what's happened and to hold to hold responsible not just Hamas, but any Israeli leaders who they think have not prioritized bringing their loved ones home.